On this particular Star Wars review, we're going to be looking back at four sitcoms that had a Star Wars related episode, and it's going to be a mix of four of my favorite sitcoms of all time, those being Friends, That 70's Show, How I Met Your Mother, and The Big Bang Theory. Kicking it off with Friends, we're going to be looking at the one with the Princess Leia fantasy. I think this was inevitable that this is going to be the one we were going to be looking at. And in this one, it was the season 3 premiere where Ross and Rachel had just officially gotten together. After a long wait, we finally got them together, and Rachel asking Ross about a fantasy that he may have, and that fantasy just so happens to be what every Star Wars fan's fantasy has always been, and that is the slave Leia costume. However, this episode is the one that infamously ruined the slave Leia costume, as we all know the finale to this. However, Phoebe starts making fun of Ross. She even pretends to be Leia. Ross doesn't like that conversation. And in the process, we also hear about a weird, awkward fantasy with Chandler, Matthew Perry's character, where he always envisions his mom after sex for some reason. And Joey has one of the funniest lines like, "Yeah, I envision your mom too." And that was funny. And then during this time, Monica's getting over a breakup, so she really doesn't do much of anything in this episode. But here at the very end, Rachel gives Ross that fantasy that he wants. However, Chandler ruined that fantasy because all of a sudden Ross starts envisioning his mom, and it throws off everything, and it basically ruined it. And it was a funny episode. It was a solid one. It's one of the most iconic episodes in the Friends category. However, the following episode, the one where nobody's ready, is actually my favorite Friends episode, ironically enough. But yeah, this one was a solid entry. I'll give the episode I'll give it a B because it was a nice entry into kicking off season 3, where around this point Friends has been at its peak year and time. So I was fine with this one. Now we're going to be looking at the 70's show, where we'll be talking about, obviously, A New Hope. Now, initially, this is going to be the only thing I was going to review, but then looking back at it, it was going to be a very short review, so that's why I decided to cram in all these sitcoms together. This basically follows Eric and the friends going to see A New Hope. The episode even starts the exact same way A New Hope would start, with the ship showing from worm's eye view. However, instead of a ship, it's the Vista Cruiser, and it's Eric, Kelso, Hyde, and Fez going to see Star Wars for the first time. And Eric becomes a fanatic. He just becomes a super fan, and you can tell in later seasons how much of a big fan he becomes. Like, he even has this moment with Donna where she dresses as Princess Leia later on in the season. Speaking of Leia, that is the name of Eric's daughter in that 90's show, the spin-off to that 70's show. This episode talks about Red finally going full-time because the family is broke. They're gonna be struggling for a while, but then he gets a full-time job at the plant, and then the owner's son, David, who was this loser back in the day, is now handsome, and now he's crushing on Donna. Eric gets jealous. Eric then even has a dream sequence where he is envisioning himself as Luke, and then the rest of the cast are other Star Wars characters. However, Darth Vader takes Leia from Donna. Now, at this point, we didn't know that Luke and Leia were brother and sister since it's in the 70's. Empire Strike Back doesn't come out till the 80's, and so on and so forth. And then, obviously, we didn't know that Darth Vader was the father of Luke and Leia. So there was that little plot hole. And I like that they put that detail, like, hey, we didn't know that yet, so there shouldn't be any jealousy or awkwardness yet. It is awkward for the fans because they didn't know that yet. But however, Eric decides to fight for Donna to get her back, and he's like, "Hey, David's trying to get at you," and David's like, "Yeah, yeah, I am." And then Eric and David are agreeing with each other. Donna gets mad because Eric starts saying a bunch of things that are not true, like, "Yeah, the girls just want to be friends," and stuff like that. But my favorite part of this episode was when David talks about how um the plant's gonna go out of business. Eric, instead of fighting for Donna now, he punches David to defend his father. That was a different twist, and I really love that moment. David's character, he has asthma. They've been playing it off throughout the whole episode, but the asthma comes back and then he starts sounding like Vader, like, "You won't see the last of me, Eric. I will get Donna." And then he walks away like if he was Darth Vader. The show ends with the parents going to watch Star Wars, and they all have different opinions on it. Red really doesn't like it, but eventually he does like it when a big explosion happens. I really love that part when Lori was like, "I'm bored, Kelso. What should we do?" And then Kelso goes, "You should go see Star Wars." It was just so funny, and it just basically showed like what the world was like when the very first Star Wars came out. So it was really nice to see that preview for once. This was a really fun episode. I'll give it a B plus. Can't wait to talk about the next one. How I Met Your Mother is probably my favorite sitcom of all time. I really love the writing that they did of like Ted Mosby telling his kids about how he met his mother and all the journey and adventures that he had throughout the years with his friends is a really cool concept. And while the finale wasn't the greatest and it's disappointed fans, the alternate ending honestly made it a lot better for me. Uh, and For a Star Wars based episode this far in advance on How I Met Your Mother, it's kind of disappointing. But throughout the show, they have shown how much Ted loves Star Wars, even at a point where he almost married Stella, even though she hates Star Wars or doesn't even get it or seen it. And then there's even times where they show like Ted and the friends going to Star Wars premieres. Uh, Barney Stinson has a stormtrooper in his house, but we're gonna be looking at Trilogy Time, season 7, episode 20. This one was very unique. Now, at this point, How I Met Your Mother was really watering down, and then they kept focusing on going backwards and like showing you previous stuff that was fun and awesome about How I Met Your Mother. You could tell they were like running out of steam and running out of ideas, but this is one of those few ideas that was actually kind of nice because we get to see them going back through the years, and basically what they do is they made a pact to watch the Star Wars trilogy every 3 years. They get to envision their future. However, the future is always different than expected. There's even a point where like Marshall wanted to give up on marrying Lily, but it seems that Barney's journey is the one that changes the most because each year he's always just fantasizing himself with a different woman. However, this time around, Barney's in a happy relationship with a woman named Quinn, and he goes, "You know what? You are gonna be seeing Quinn more often, and I'm gonna fix it." Like the episode starts with them fighting over moving in together. So, I really love that. The change in Barney. I think he was the best part of this episode, if I'm being honest. Like he had the biggest change. Ted was at the point where he was just depressed. He just was giving up. However, we see that in 3 years from then, he gets his first daughter. It was kind of cool to see like how they envision their lives every time they go and rewatch the trilogy. At the same time, it is kind of just a flashback episode. Now, even though How I Met Your Mother was my favorite sitcom out of the four that I'm going to talk about, this was my least favorite episode to discuss out of all of these. So I'll give it a C plus because I think it just focused too much on the past and never really did anything more than that. And by this point, How I Met Your Mother was wrapping up, but it was pretty cool to see um, them adding this thing where they would watch the Star Wars trilogy every 3 years, something that a lot of people have done because of this episode. I myself can be counted as one of those. Now, it wouldn't be right talking about Star Wars and sitcoms if you didn't include The Big Bang Theory. And there's actually countless episodes you can discuss. There's one where Sheldon stalks James Earl Jones and he's just such a super fanboy. There's one where Sheldon and Leonard drive up to George Lucas's house. So there's definitely a bunch of episodes you can discuss when it comes to the Big Bang Theory and Star Wars. But I will be talking about season 9, episode 11, the opening night excitation. This is probably my favorite out of the sitcom episodes that I'll be discussing. And this one came at a right time because I remember this week like it was yesterday. I was 16 years old. It was Thursday. I finished my homework. I'm just anxious because the following day it was gonna be the release of Star Wars, and then I was just watching TV. I had nothing else to do, so I'm just watching TV. I'm like, what is there to watch? And then I find that The Big Bang Theory was gonna do an episode of the opening night of Star Wars. Basically, it's kind of like what that 70's show episode was, but a lot better. The gang buys tickets to go see Star Wars: A New Hope, even though they never directly say Star Wars: A New Hope. They just say Star Wars movie. Um, and in the process, it's also Amy's birthday, who had just gotten back together with Sheldon, and unfortunately, Sheldon would have to miss the movie in order to show her his appreciation for Amy, thanks to a dream sequence um, from his idol. And because of it, now Leonard, Raj, and Howard have to figure out what to do with the extra ticket. They're thinking about inviting Penny. They thought about inviting Stewart, and then at the end they invite Will Wheaton. And now keep in mind, Will Wheaton plays himself, and Will Wheaton is also famous for Star Trek. So it was actually kind of funny to see Will Wheaton dressed as a Star Trek person, even though I don't know Star Trek that much. But it was actually kind of funny to watch. Now, on the side note, Sheldon wants to give Amy the best birthday present ever in order to show his appreciation. And this is where this just comes out of left field, and Sheldon offers sex, which up to this point, Sheldon and Amy were virgins. So to them, this was big, and it was actually kind of funny when they have the reveal when Sheldon talks to Penny and Bernadette about this, and then Amy gets super excited about her present. Now, it was actually kind of funny when Sheldon and Amy are talking about like how they're nervous about having sex for the first time. Meanwhile, the gang is like nervous if Star Wars: The Force Awakens is gonna suck. And then both nights end the same way with them being like, "Oh, I that was better than I expected," and one being a little too overexcited. So it was just brilliantly written. And at this point, I haven't been watching The Big Bang Theory. I think Big Bang Theory had overstayed its welcome up to this point, but it was actually nice to go back and watch it. And this was hands down one of my favorite episodes. Before the show eventually wrapped up, I'm giving this an A. It's really good. It did its job. It got you excited, and it kind of was that feeling of like, oh wow, we really are getting a new Star Wars movie. It's The Force Awakens, and that was really nice to see like how people were feeling. And it was actually kind of smart for them to release this episode a day before The Force Awakens was coming out. So those were my thoughts on some of my favorite sitcoms related to Star Wars. My next review will be episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So stay tuned tomorrow with my review of that movie.